Let's get started. So yeah, and I know people are still coming in, so but I would just like to introduce myself. I'm Lama Rod. I use he, him pronouns, and I am living and teaching on the ancestral lands of the Muskogee, Cherokee, and Creek people here in Atlanta. And it's really nice to see so many of you for our Chenrezig practice. And possibly some of you are new to the practice, and we have plenty of online resources, videos, and recordings that you can access anytime on YouTube as well. And this is, of course, a practice based upon the traditional Tibetan Buddhist practice of Chenrezig Avalokiteshvara, who is considered, well, technically, I'm a little vague with the technicalities around Tibetan Buddhism these days, which is bizarre considering like my academic training in the field and how that just kind of goes out the door when you have to apply these practices to real life in the contemporary world during the apocalypse. So things get a little blurry after a while. But just technically, Chenrezig is a bodhisattva, not technically a fully awakened Buddha. Now, I know that doesn't change anything at all for anyone. So Chenrezig is almost fully awakened, but is still considered in Tibetan tradition the embodiment, the expression of love, where Tara, who is a fully awakened Buddha, is considered the expression of compassion. And of course, there are a lot of ontological stories around the relationship between Tara and Chenrezig, which are really quite beautiful. One story is that Chenrezig gave birth to Tara through a tear. Chenrezig was moved and cried out of love for all beings, and from that tear, Tara emerged. Now, how a bodhisattva can give birth to a fully awakened Buddha, again, we're not gonna go off into that right now. These are just stories, right, that we use to deepen our practice with, right? And these stories, should always be held with a lot of care, a lot of tenderness, right? Because we don't really know, and nor do we have the capacity to fully know the truth of things, right? That's not saying that we're too ignorant or we're lost in delusion. It means that like we're still working to awaken the full capacity of our minds, which is another way of saying we're working to remember, right, who we are, that we are expressions of space and emptiness and energy and fluidity, right? That consciousness, right, this capacity of knowing, this capacity to feel, this consciousness exists beyond time, right? There's no such thing as time or boundaries or borders with our consciousness, but we feel very limited, right now. So we're working to expand from the sense of ego back out into the expression of pure consciousness, right? And that's what it actually means to be awakened, right? And that is also the fruition, the awakening of love, this profound, deep holding of everything. Right? One of the most powerful, we can say is one of the most powerful expressions, within our capacity, but it's more than just an expression. Love is a state, right? There is the state of being fully awakened is a state that transcends categories, right? So when you're fully awakened, there's no difference between love and compassion and gratitude and joy. It's just one expression, of the nature, the very state of the mind itself. But in the relative, which we're moving through, we are skillfully trying to label these different expressions of the energetic state of our minds so that we have a way to start like getting into a practice, right? Like we have to start somewhere. We have to start with a piece of the mind instead of just saying, oh, I have to get into the mind in general, but we start with a relative practice that leads us into the state, into the awakened state of mind. So compassion, gratitude, love, the four Brahma-viharas and so forth, right? So Chenrezig, right, is this expression of the state, of awakened mind, who is specifically arising as a deity associated with one particular quality of this awakened state of mind, and that's love, right? Now, I did really want to play Hardaway when I, was thinking about opening the session. Hardaway, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me, the club, for those of us who were in the club scene in the 90s. So we may play that going out of the session today. So I bring that up because I was like, oh, what is love? What is love? And we can think about love. We can have these concepts around love, but again, love is again a state, right? Is a state of just this deep, wide open acceptance, right, of everything. Acceptance doesn't mean being excited about anything. It's not about condoning, it's about allowing, just saying, oh yeah, this is happening, right? And that's the root of love, saying, oh yeah, this is happening, and I'm gonna move from a place of reactivity into a place of responsiveness, right? And we're living in a world, and well, I would argue that samsara in general is just it's just overreactivity, right? Overreactivity to a place that there is no space for us to practice responsiveness, right? If there's no space for responsiveness, there's no space to actually awaken these other qualities of the mind, not just love, but also compassion and gratitude and so forth and joy. We need an experience of space in order to make choices to get free and to adopt the practices that lead to liberation, which is the remembering of the state of our minds, right? And, as I've often said and written, in the past, I never really understood love until I started practicing in Tibetan Buddhism, and particularly until I started really getting into practices like Chenrezig and other forms of Chenrezig as well. And that's when I began to understand the energetic quality of love, right? And that expression of love had to begin with myself, right? That I had to develop a deep allowing and holding of who and what I was, which is some of the hardest work we will do in this life, is to essentially I would say the work of holding the shadow, tending to the shadow, the things that we're habitually running away from in our experience, the things that disappoint us, the trauma, right, the despair, the desires and the appetites, maybe that we experience, right? Learning how to gaze upon that, right? Because Chenrezig means great eye. So the idea of acceptance and holding is actually inherent in Chenrezig's name. Chenrezig gazes upon, right? Holds everything, sees everything, but chooses how to respond to suffering, right? And in the same way, when we're developing this practice for ourselves, we're learning how to gaze upon ourselves, right? To hold ourselves with this unconditional acceptance, right? And I see so many people in the world. This is one that, for those of you who follow me around into different spaces, and also people I'm in personal relationships with know that, like, I love talking shit about all of these like pseudo spiritual self-help people that are arising all over the place. I don't want to get into like a whole rant, but since you're here, I'll give you a little piece of it. Like I see a lot of folks who are just like on the social medias who are just like, you have to love yourself and you have to like, just have like these motivational expressions that you just say every day, and you just have to take a nap and you have to do some yoga and 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 you just have to be happy, And I'm like this cynical thing that rolls in. And I'm like, is it enough? Right? Like, is a kind of an affirmation enough, right? To really do this really hard labor, and it's not, you need more than a really beautiful phrase to meet the violence of the world. But more importantly, you need a deeper practice to meet the ways in which the violence of the world is attempting to shape you. And actually, it has shaped us, right? So the work is actually, how do we undo the ways in which delusion and violence has shaped us, right? It has restricted our capacity to experience unconditional holding for ourselves, right? And I can sense that labor, or the level of labor that people have put in, like I can feel essentially self-love in people, because that self-love holds the space for suffering as well. So it's not always this cheery experience, but it's like a very balanced, sobering experience. There's a groundedness, there's a heaviness to the expression of authentic self-love, right? I can feel, I can feel and see the scars in people, as I've told this story many times, but when I had to really understood what self-love was, it meant that I had to hold the parts of myself that I didn't know how to fix, right? I had to hold the things that I didn't understand how to explain or to make sense of. I just had to notice it. I had to feel it. I had to allow it. And that's when real, authentic self-love begins, right? And that becomes a really natural, easy expression for others, right? So you can feel people's deep labor, of self-love for themselves, because again, I'm using the sun quite a bit, in teaching this idea that like Self-love is like when you have this work for yourself, you become like the sun that radiates effortlessly. You know, you just illuminate. Of course, when it's like what Lizzo says, like, you know, which I love this lyric, from her first album, where it's like, what did she say? You know, if I shine, everyone's gonna shine. You know, and that's perfect. It's like if I start illuminating, you're gonna catch that illumination, right? And people are gonna feel that, and they're gonna be drawn towards you, right? And also, you know, quite honestly, self-hate also draws people as well. That's a different kind of energy, absolutely. Right. You know, so it's not like self-love draws and self-hate repels. It can be actually quite a very similar experience, right? But with self-love, this kind of radiance is actually helping people, it's actually reflecting back to people the work that they can do to begin to experience this love for themselves, right? And this is what Chenrezig is teaching us, right? And it's not just, you know, like these really great, wonderful affirmations. It's about going deep, right, into our energy bodies, into our minds, and beginning to move energy, because this is a tantric path. So we're interested in energy, right? We're interested in awakening, you know, the subtle energy body, the body of channels and chakras and nadis and so forth, like this energy body that is in conversation and relationship with all our other body manifestations, especially the physical body, right? When the subtle energy body is awakening, you know, and we're just moving through the energy body, you know, cleansing, moving energy around, you know, awakening different channels and avenues and all kinds of stuff. The body, the physical body begins to benefit from that. And so the body, there's a glow, there's a radiance that the physical body actually begins to hold as well. The lightness. Because we're trying to lift the vibration. You know, this is the physical world, is lots of lower vibrations, but in our practices, we're trying to lift the vibration, right? We're trying to get into these higher expressions of energy and mind, right? So that we can actually have the capacity to move through the world, right? Move through this physical world, not being consumed by the world, but instead we begin to consume the world through our practice, right? You know, we begin to consume the world when we begin to understand the illusion, the illusionary quality of the world. And you can't do that until you begin to love the world, right? So again, loving the world, holding the world, tending to the world, feeling the world, letting, you know, things go when we need to let them go, right? And for so many of us, right, yes, the world feels so solid, so rigid, so material, you know, just so really just like heavy, you know, heavy. And again, when we're working with these practices, you know, energy body and raising the vibration, like the world begins to transform. The world isn't just this experience that's full of antagonism and is full of harm or violence or fear. It becomes this felt experience of a dream. This is like, oh, this is a dream. This is an experience that I'm having, right? And I'm with others who are having a similar experience as well, but this isn't all of who I am, right? Like this is, you know, life this experience of life, we will understand at the time of our death has been just a second. But while we're here, we're doing the work of trying to wake up and to help others to wake up out of the dream, because for many of us, this is more than just a dream. It's actually very much a nightmare. And what Chenrezig, right, is trying to do as this deity, as a practice deity, is helping us to begin to feel into the illusion of everything, where everything becomes much more fluid, than rigid. It takes us from being stuck to moving, right? It takes us from just sitting still into dancing, right? And when we dance, when we move, we start moving energy. And when the energy starts to flow, we can ride these currents of energy into the deepest, most simplest and purified expression of the state of our minds, right? Right, to love everything, right? To love everything, including ourselves, is to begin to understand the nature of reality for what it is, right? Because when you're loving and holding, you're not reacting to everything. And when you're not reacting, you can actually begin to pay attention to the state of things, right? And when we're reacting, we're not paying attention, we're distracted, right? So when we're letting go of reactivity, moving into responsiveness, then that's when the nature of things begin to reveal themselves, right? That's when you begin to sense, notice things that a lot of people aren't noticing, right? And you begin to understand that we are filling in the blanks where there's nothing happening, right? There's a lot of gaps, in the presentation of reality, that because of our misunderstanding of the nature of things, we're just kind of filling in with narratives that actually don't exist to begin with. So the more you get into this practice, the more you let go of filling in the blanks, and you just sit in the spaces that arise in between things, right? And then, of course, the movement, the urgency of what we think is happening, it begins to transform, right? Because we're not busy trying to fill in everything. So that's like resting. We begin to experience a resting of the mind, which again means that we're disrupting reactivity and just letting the mind be. Right? And some of you are already experiencing this, absolutely. I have no doubt that you're excited. I know I've talked to at least a couple of you about some of these experiences, right? But this is, again, coming from love, right? And the New Saints, in my next book coming out in October, and hopefully in the next 2 months, we'll release the book cover. You can start pre-ordering. But in the New Saints, so Spring Washam, many of you know Spring Washam. When I was talking to her when she was writing her current book, The Spirit of Harriet Tubman, we were we would have these little prayer sessions together, because we were we're not going to finish these books. And I was helping her find resources to finish the books, and she was helping me get resources together to finish our books. We were just we're not going to make it through these books. We had a very similar experience in writing our books. But I joked with her and I was like, what I'm trying to do is kind of like rewrite and reinterpret Buddhism. And she was like, no wonder you're having a problem. She was like, I don't know if there's enough prayer for that. For you to completely reimagine the Buddhist canon. But so I bring it up, because in New Saints, I'm kind of like letting go of love and compassion as things that I've been talking about. And I've just kind of developed a new understanding of this work, so I use the term awakened care, so I was like, I'm tired of talking, flipping in between love and compassion and joy. So awakened care is like the streaming together of love, compassion, and joy into this force, and I, of course, have practices that you can start awakening that for yourself. But, for me right now, it's just like, I care deeply about everything, about myself and about others. And this care is not just, oh, I want people to be happy, but this care is actually, I want people to be free, right? And I want there to be joy in our freedom work, in our liberation work, right? And I think this is what Chenrezig teaches us, is that, oh, there's joy in this. Like, this is hard work, but there's joy. There's so much joy here, right? And I want us to tap into that as well as we continue doing this work together. But to love, again, to love the world, to care for ourselves, to care for others, to want ourselves and everyone just to be free, is the most important goal or aspiration that we can have in this life. It is the most important, to want everyone to be free, and also recognizing that sometimes we stand in the way of people's liberation. We are in the way sometimes. Right. And the deepest care for ourselves is understanding how to get out the way. There is a song that I like to think about when I think about getting out the way. It's from the early 2000s, but it's not appropriate to share the lyrics to that song. But some of you know, if you were in the clubs in the early 2000s, you know what song I'm talking about, which was completely inappropriate. Like with activists, I'll just say this, with activists, what I loved about like my 20s activism was that like we could kind of let go of the intense seriousness sometimes and just do really inappropriate things, like, sing lyrics to a song that was completely inappropriate, but we did it anyway. But I'm sure you can find that song on your own. But yeah, like, to get out the way, right? Like, sometimes you don't have to understand what people are doing, but you can understand that they're trying to get free. It may have been ludicrous, but I don't remember specifically that. Yeah, So let's begin. We're just gonna do just the next 30 minutes of practice, and then we're gonna open up space for questions. And so in the practice, we're just gonna move through, right, the practice that you may have been practicing. For those of you who've done this with me in person, it's the same practice we've been working on last fall when I introduced the practice, but it's the same practice you can find on YouTube as well. So in the practice, again, we're gonna start with, calling in our homecoming circle, right? We're going to be awakening this warmth, this flame in our root chakra, you know, and we're going to be imagining sending this warmth up into the heart center. And of course, this is where the name Ring of Fire really comes from. I received this practice as a vision, and the vision was the heart ringed with fire, and from there I began to understand particularly what the steps were, but this fire is actually about awakening, expanding, the heart chakra, right? And beginning to experience the spaciousness, which will also come with some heightened, what we will perceive as some heightened emotional activity, right? Because that's what happens when you start stirring. Majaya used to talk about the heart center being crusted over, and I like that because in my practice, I imagine this ring of fire really melting, the iciness around the heart chakra and getting us into this expansive fluidity, right? So we're going to be doing that and then doing some mantra work with that as well. I'm chanting the mantra with the drum, right? So there's going to be some breath as well. And of course, if the breath becomes a little too much to focus on, you can just focus on the visualization without the breath. And it's okay if you're not visualizing anything, right? Just as my teacher would say, it's the most important part of visualization practice is actually just having a conviction, a trust that what you're being asked to visualize is actually happening for us. And that's it. So wherever you choose to be in the practice is essentially where you should be, right? So let's begin. Let's begin moving through the practice. And I would like to just light my practice candle here. I have a little candle here that I like to light as I begin practice. And again, light, flames, fire is so incredibly important, for us right now, to remember the light, to imagine that the world is full of light. No matter how much darkness we're perceiving, the world is essentially an expression of light. So remembering that. And when I light a candle like this, I start out by just imagining that this candle, this flame begins to radiate throughout the world, throughout the space, throughout my home, throughout the land. And I turn my inner attention, like this felt inner attention into the energy of light that began to perceive radiating from everything. And even our minds, right, are expressions of this light, this luminosity. And we can imagine our bodies full of this light as well. And initially, like this is where we can start tapping into and experiencing this energetic expression of love, that there's light, there's luminosity, there's fluidity inherent in everything. That everything is more than just a solid thing, that there is a luminosity, a light that we can start tuning into. And so when you're ready, shifting your attention to the seat, noticing the weight of the body making contact with the seat. And always when we begin to journey like this and to practice, it's so important just to touch into the weightiness of things, into the seat, the weight of the body, the earth under us. And when I do this, I sometimes just offer this is a short prayer asking the earth, this element of foundation and grounding, just to hold me, right? And as I move into these higher vibrations, these higher levels of consciousness, that when it's time for me to return back to this timeline, that the earth, the ground, the earth element reaches and catches me and gently guides me back into this moment. And the earth will always do that. Right? If we definitely ask, but if we just remain open, the earth is always catching us, always holding us, always stabilizing us. And that is an expression of love from the earth. The earth is always holding us. Regardless of who we are, the earth is holding us. And for those of us who are struggling to heal from the violence of conditional loving, like starting with the earth, the unconditional love of the earth is really a really powerful place to start, an important place to start. Just constantly tuning into the constant unconditional love of the earth. Always holding us, always caring for us. And so as we continue, I invite you to call into your space, your homecoming circle, your circle of benefactors. And for those of you who are new to the practice, I just invite you just to call into the space all the beings who love you, right? All the beings who want you to be safe and happy and free and liberated. You don't have to know who these beings are. You just open your mind and say, please, all beings who love me, please come and gather around me. And again, you can visualize your circle of benefactors, or you can just have a sense that they're gathered with you. Either is fine. But when you feel confident that your beings, your benefactors have arrived, I invite you just to shift your attention and back out into the world, just the world, whatever the world is, people and places and things. And I want you just to reflect on the love that's in the world, right? And maybe you can make that really specific and remember a loving act from someone that you experienced recently or you've witnessed somewhere. And that how these loving acts are happening everywhere, constantly, all the time, regardless of what we think and feel about the state of the world. That the world is full of this deep love. And maybe as you reflect on this, maybe there's a tenderness that begins to awaken, an emotional fluidity and openness, a softness begins to be felt. Maybe that softness or that tenderness is also felt physically, that our bodies begin to relax and open a little more as we reflect on the energy of love in the world. And this tenderness, this openness, is also an expression of Chenrezig as well. Like we're beginning to experience the consciousness of Chenrezig with this opening and this softening, this remembering of love. When you're ready, I invite you to imagine that your circle of benefactors begins to absorb this energy of love from the world. They're not taking all the energy, they're not sucking the world dry of love, but they're just like taking in a little bit of this energy of love. And they're like batteries that are charging. So your benefactors are like batteries that begin to get recharged from the boundless supply of love in the world. You can experience them or perceive your benefactors as they're absorbing this energy. Maybe they begin to glow, they begin to radiate even more intensely as they're charged with the love from the world around us. Right, and so when you're ready, I invite you to bring your attention into your navel area, just the lower, kind of upper pelvis, lower stomach area. And this is traditionally part of our energy bodies, physical bodies that hold heat. Solar plexus, or the third chakra area. And imagine that your circle of benefactors begins to radiate this collected energy of love into the center of that part of our bodies around the navel. And it begins to awaken a really soft, radiant flame of light, like an actual flame of fire. As if you're lighting a candle and that flame begins to awaken right behind the navel area. That is being sparked and fueled by the energy of love your benefactors are radiating as well. And I invite you to imagine that you're breathing in and out of that flame. So shifting the breath down low into the body and breathing in and out from that flame. Particularly connecting to the warmth of that flame in the out breath. Just a few more breaths here. And going a little further, I invite you to breathe, inhale into that flame. And as you inhale, holding the breath at the top of the inhale, and as you hold the breath, feeling the intensity, the energy of that flame increase. And after about 5 seconds or less, releasing that breath out. Again, inhaling deep into the flame, holding, feeling the intensity, the warmth, the heat of that flame grow. And when you're ready, releasing that breath. And I want you to do it just one more time before we continue. So inhaling, holding, releasing. So coming back to a natural breath. Adjusting the body, always tending to the body as we continue into the practice. And next, when you're ready, bringing your attention up to the heart chakra, right in the middle of the chest here. You can even bring a hand or anything up to the chest just to feel that. in the heart chakra here, being this epicenter, this energetic epicenter, like a station, right? That is about awakening, deepening, concern, care, love, empathy. In Tibetan practice, the heart center represents both the heart and mind, inseparable, right? The nature of the mind with our capacity to care, to feel, is all a part of this heart chakra. And we can imagine heart chakra, the energy of the heart chakra, as just this kind of ball of light in the heart chakra. It doesn't have to be a specific color right now, like white light is fine. But as you deepen into the practice, get curious about how you begin to relate or visualize this heart chakra, your heart chakra. What images come to mind? So feeling the heart chakra, noticing the heart chakra, and then tracing down back to the flame, this awakened flame behind our navel area, above our pelvis. So to continue, we're going to be sending this energy from this awakened flame up into the heart chakra, where streams of this flame will begin to circle around the heart chakra. So to begin, shifting our attention back to the flame, taking a few breaths in and out from the flame. And when you're ready, inhaling into the flame, holding the breath, feeling the intensity of the flame increase. And as you begin to release, imagine that you're exhaling streams of this flame up into the chest, where it begins to circle around the heart chakra. So you can continue moving through a few breaths, breathing into the flame, holding, and then exhaling the stream of fire up and around the heart chakra. You can do this just a few times so that you begin to feel or notice a couple different streams of fire around the heart chakra. And so, an alternative experience here that sometimes I use is that when I'm breathing into the flame, I just imagine the heat, the warmth of the flame just being sent up with my out breath, or my internal exhale rather, up into the heart chakra, where that warmth just actually incorporates itself into the heart chakra. So I begin to feel the warming in that way of the heart chakra, which is also the experience of expansion and opening in the heart chakra. So any one of these kind of methods will get us to, the same end. And again, a couple more breaths here, and then we'll transition into the mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum. We're gonna transition into just a couple of minutes of mantra recitation. So again, Om Mani Padme Hum. Homage to the jewel at the heart of the lotus. So again, union. As we hold, as Chenrezig holds and tends to, they're doing so in a way that recognizes the inherent wholeness of everything. That everything is always in union, if we can recognize that. That the jewel is always in the lotus, and when there's separation, that there is suffering. So relying on the mantra and the blessings of Chenrezig, we're bringing our hearts, the energetic expression of our empathy and care, back into union, back into focus and wholeness. And letting the blessings of Chenrezig, the lineage, and all the beings who love us take care of this, take care of us as we move into this period of deep healing and union. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 And just returning now your attention back to the heart center as we prepare to finish up this session. Imagine that from the heart center, we imagine actually restoring the love that our benefactors absorb from the world, from our own heart centers. And we begin to imagine that from our heart center, we begin to be filled with this soft, radiant white light. And that we begin to radiate this light out into the world around us. In very much the same way Tara, as the guiding star, radiates her compassion into the darkness of delusion. We radiate like the sun back into the world, filling the world up with love and care. Imagining that all beings are beginning to experience this light of love and care from our practice. When you're ready, returning your attention back to the seat, the weight of the body, and the seat rising to hold you, noticing that sensation. Coming back into this moment, this timeline. Shifting our attention back to our benefactors, our homecoming circle, thanking them for their care, their constant love. And imagine that they dissolve into white light, and that light is absorbed into our heart centers. Slowly, we begin to imagine that this radiance that we're radiating, that our bodies begin to slowly dissolve into this white light. Releasing our minds, our consciousness to mingle with the boundlessness of emptiness and space itself. And then slowly allowing yourself to re-arise back into your body, offering some simple movements to reawaken the body, maybe a few deep cleansing breaths. Coming back again into this moment. And hopefully coming back into this moment with a little more space, a little more space for responsiveness over reactivity. So thank you all so much for your practice. And just the last moments of this session together, I just want to open up to any questions that you can ask in the chat, or you may be able to just ask it directly if we're able to unmute you. So whoever feels appropriate for you, I'll be checking the chats as well to see. Thank you all so much for your kindness and your care. It's good to see so many wonderful folks in the chats, or just in the space. So many dear and wonderful friends. Maybe friends is actually just a stretch. Yeah, any questions? Yeah. Right. So this practice is really, just to let you know, this is like with any practice, and if you've been in Medicine Buddha since the onset, you know this is going to turn into something completely different sooner than later. But there's a lot of different pieces to this practice, including we're going to do a mantra practices as well, in the same way that we're doing in Medicine Buddha right now, because the mantras are really important. And with the mantras, right, the mantras are, really about beginning to, the mantras become a doorway into the nature of things, into the nature of reality, right? That the mantra is the consciousness of the deity itself, or themselves. And that the mantra is really the sound of emptiness, in a way, right? But we'll get into that more when we get there. But okay, I have a question. So what if we're in a situation where someone else needs to get out of our way? That still reminds me of the song, but I'm not going to go there. Or is this just an illusion on my part? So again, what if we are in a situation where someone else needs to get out of our way? Yeah, well then, right, that becomes a situation where we're moving into responsiveness, and we say, okay, like, how do I respond to this situation of someone, that I actually need to get through? Like, how do I respond to this, right? Like, how do I actually organize? How do I address this, right? And what, again, what are my tools? Like, what am I calling into the space to help work through this, right? And this is also a part of where we're going to move with this practice down the road. We're going to move into wrath, because Mahakala, which some of you practice, Mahakala is actually an emanation of Chenrezig. So we're going to bridge this kind of practice of love into actually direct action, which is what Mahakala does, really. But yeah, so like, yeah, calling in your resources, what am I going to do? How am I going to respond to this? And then eventually, you know, what would it look like, right, for me to just move forward through someone? What does that actually mean? You know, it's like, you won't get out the way. I've done everything that I can do, and I'm just going to keep moving, you know. Of course, personally, I've been in that position often, you know, and sometimes it's like, oh, you know what, maybe actually you're not actually in the way. Maybe I'm creating this, and that there's actually another way to think about how to move forward, right? You know, so all of this is quite possibly coming up for us, you know, when we talk about obstacles in people. You know, but yeah. And then, of course, I think these practices can actually shift energy so that obstacles tend to be moved. Like you know, again, when I've had these situations, I've done practice and I just had to communicate with people saying, you know what, listen, like something has to change, you know? And through all of that effort, things do change often. But sometimes it's like, oh, you're in the way because this is actually not my path. And you're actually showing up in a really skillful way to remind me of that as well. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. And that's a lot. Yeah, I got a little message about Lama John McCransky. I mean, this is where Lama John's benefactor practice, that's where I've been so deeply inspired by Lama John's work, being in, being in the early Sangha back in the day with Dzogchen Foundation, you know, even when practicing Lama John's, version of root version really of benefactor practice, like it really helped me to move deeper, right, into this work that I've been talking about. Can we say more about this practice and working with the shadow? Yeah, working, again, this tenderness, the softness, the opening. Like when we turn towards the shadow, we kind of like get really rigid and clenchy. Like we're like, oh, shadow, all this shit. And what we're trying to do in these initial stages of the practice is to just soften, to let go, and to connect to the consciousness of Chenrezig, which is actually protecting us as we move deeper into these experiences, right? And as our heart breaks, as the grief is real when we're working with the shadow, our heart breaks. And we allow Chenrezig to awaken, to hold that brokenheartedness and that same kind of tenderness, right? The definition about joy, I talk about joy a lot in the new book, actually, as I was saying earlier. Yeah, joy is space. Like joy is like when I begin to see and experience the fluidity and the translucent nature of things, right? So I'm not responding to the rigidity of everything, but I'm actually beginning to respond and to tune into the potentiality of things. Like the world is full of potential because everything is an expression of emptiness. And that's where our joy starts to come from. It's like, oh, like this seems really real, but it's not as real as I think it is. What I thought only had one solution maybe has multiple solutions. Maybe this person's standing in my way. Maybe I can just go around them, right? Reserving energy, protecting energy is a really key part of this. Like, I want to practice skillfulness and wisdom, right? And say, what is the best way to get free that helps to protect my energy, to conserve energy. And that means also that we get clear about what our work is. Like what is it that I am supposed to be doing right now? Because again, many of us are busy doing other people's work, right? And we sometimes use that strategically to avoid doing hard work that we need to do. Service to others becomes a way that we bypass the service that we should be offering to ourselves, right? And then we get resentful at the end of the day because who's taking care of us when we spend all our time taking care of other people? Sometimes love is a boundary, a space, a distance between us and something, someone else that causes us to harden. Yeah. Boundaries should always be about love, which is hard. A boundary should be about protecting. Like when you set a boundary, it's like, okay, I want people to be safe and well and happy. And without this boundary, someone's going to get hurt. You may be the one doing the hurting. Someone may, be doing the hurting, but like you need the space and it's love. I don't set boundaries to hurt people, but that's how it's read, right? Like someone sets a boundary. Many people have boundaries around me, right? Absolutely. Like I don't know who doesn't have a boundary, set against them. But boundaries, again, if we're doing the boundary setting, it's about love. Someone's out of control, right? And we need this boundary to create the space, right? I'm just gonna about sources around Chenrezig. There are books about Chenrezig. I can't call them to mind right now. But there's one particular book that is about the fasting practice of Chenrezig, which is called what is the practice called? Nyunye, correct. Yeah, so Nyunye, and there's a book about the Nyunye practice that you can find online as well. And that's a really nice introduction to Chenrezig, even though that's also about the Nyunye practice. How can we practice regret with compassion? Well, how do you tend to the regret? Compassion means that you just allow the regret to be there. You experience it and you let it go, right? It's the tenderness that we have around the regret. There can be a lot. Compassion can help release the intensity of regret, right? And one of the ways we do that is by understanding that we're not the only ones, right, who are struggling in regret, we've done something that we don't feel good about now, right? And that this is a part of interdependence, that we're always going to be impacting so many other beings in ways that we're not even conscious of. And compassion helps to soften that rigidity, right? Because this is really a mess. Interdependence is really about messiness. If I move one way, it's going to impact someone else, and that's just really the law here, right? And so we have to have a lot of compassion to hold the ways in which we create harm in ways that we're not even conscious of. Nyunye. Yep, Nyunye. Fasting practices. Yeah, the fast, yeah, the Buddhist fasting practice, Nyingye method of 1,000 arm Chenrezig. Yeah, that's a really good source. I used to do a lot of Nunez as well, but that's a full-on practice. That's one of those practices that we used to do, and we're like, no one's ever gonna understand why we're doing this. You're just like fasting and just going through hell, trying to purify karma because you don't have anything else better to do. Then I got into plant medicine culture and I just started doing it all over again. So there we go. I'm just geared towards suffering. And a release. It's about release as well. Okay, any other questions? We're a little past time. Anything else I may have missed? So next week, one quick question. Could you say more about the essence of all things in union, union of all things, oneness, emptiness is okay, there's time. So the lack of union is delusion. Like everything's always in union. It's us as perceivers who perceive the opposite of union. Just for the time here, I would say disunion, right? Disunion, right? Because we're always perceiving disunion, or we're perceiving the binary, right? So we're in this binary expression. We can't quite possibly experience the union. So this is why sutras like the Heart Sutra are really important, because it's really about helping us to bridge extremism back into union, right? That form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And you have to hold that and experience that, right? And that's the union. And our liberation work in this body, in this timeline, is actually about beginning to recognize the unnecessary disunion that we're engaged in, or the unnecessary binaryism that we're making too much meaning out of, right? That ultimately the ultimate expression of emptiness is union, and it's the ultimate expression because there's no such thing as anything else in emptiness. It's like emptiness is emptiness. There isn't emptiness and the opposite of emptiness in emptiness. It's just emptiness, is space, is energy, right? And again, this is a really basic practice that we can incorporate. Of course, this is Mahamudra practice, meditation practice in Kagyu school, but what does it mean, just to sit and just to contemplate? What is the union of everything? Like, why am I always buying into separation and difference? Why can't I just listen to Lauryn Hill when she says that everything is everything, right? And when you start dissolving this fixation on the binary, on extremism, then the nature of things begin to come into focus. It's like, again, like looking at a magic eye book. So with the magic eye, like, yeah, you're gazing into an image, this 3D image, and you're practicing to allow the eyes to slowly refocus, right? To stop paying attention to these patterns, right? and just to like actually begin to gaze into the nature of what this image is actually, trying to show us. And that's what this awakening work is like you're trying to gaze, not with your eyes or sense faculties, but with awareness itself. You're trying to allow awareness to gaze, to connect back into this fundamental consciousness, which is the union of everything, because it is an expression of emptiness itself. And that's where you'll know when you're doing it, because you will begin to experience freedom. And it's something that may not be, you'll be able to articulate, but you will feel it, because true liberation is a felt experience, not necessarily something that's performed or, a place we're trying to get to. It's just a state of being that we're already free, but we have to but we've gotten distracted from that freedom, from that state of freedom. And so we've gotten more focused on all the moving pieces, all the drama, all the hype, right? So again, gazing into the nature of things, you start letting go of being really interested in the hype, and you begin to gaze into how things are actually arising. And that's, again, also an expression of connecting to stillness. There's a stillness that lies at the heart of everything, that is the heart of everything, the stillness. And it's not that like everything is, you don't stop feeling things, you're not bypassing everything. Everything is in focus, like everything is happening. Like the heartbreak and the joy is still there. But again, it's like there's so much space that opens because you're not wasting energy reacting and being distracted. Like you can just hold the space, right? And everything just arises. And everything arises together. The heartbreak and the joy, the gratitude, the sorrow, everything is just there. And it's like not a big deal anymore, right? It's no longer this big deal. Is just, oh, everything's there. Okay. And then the joy is there, right? And for many of us, right, the joy is what holds the struggle to get free. It softens the edges of liberation work quite a bit, right? And that begins to naturally arise the more we begin to tune into the nature of things. And then you're in this incredible generative space of responsiveness. Then you can say, okay, now I can really take certain things seriously and have agency. And I don't have to get lost in these struggles anymore. I can just show up and do really important work, right? Also having the experience that, yes, and that there is another reality happening that's actually a liberated reality at the same time. And you can hold both of these contradictions, you can hold the contradictions. I think too many of you are distracted by the contradictions, and the closer you get to being awakened, right, the more you're going to have to deal with contradictions, where things will stop making sense. Because that is a carceral logic in samsara, where it's like we get distracted trying to make sense of everything, and that keeps us cycling in this cycle of being bound within delusion. So you actually have to let delusion be there and say, you know what, I can't figure this out, but I can hold it. I can notice it. I can pay attention to it. I can tend to the delusion, right? And again, and the reality of things began to awaken. Right. Like delusion will keep taking you as far as you keep engaging in it. Delusion, the medicine for delusion is clarity. And in this way, clarity means that like I begin to understand, that I don't have to keep moving down into this rabbit hole, that there are so many things that I won't be able to figure out, and that's fine. But what I can always come back to is that I am here to help, to benefit, to reduce harm, to reduce violence, and so forth, right? To embody joy and to offer that joy to others who may not have access to joy, right? To love, to deeply accept, right? To develop a sensitivity of how to be agents of people's liberation. And we develop that sensitivity because we are doing the work for ourselves. Like nothing like pisses me off more than people trying to lead liberation struggles who have no idea what liberation is to begin with. And I want you to pay attention to those people, because those people, it's just a performance. It's just an act. If you're going to get free, follow people who are not perfect, who do contradictory things sometimes, because liberation work isn't going to be a perfect, neat thing. Doesn't mean that like you have a license to do whatever the hell you want. That's not what I'm saying either. I'm just saying that like, if you're expecting this to be a straight shot to awaken to liberation, then you're going to be really extremely disappointed. And many people have been disappointed, right? Like if you're not willing to hold mess and discomfort, then, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have any alternatives. If I find an alternative, I will definitely share it with you. But so much of this stuff feels like just fucking crawling through mud. And letting go of this idea that I'm gonna stay clean. Somehow I'm gonna stay clean. You're not always gonna say the right thing, right? And quite honestly, in the crisis, getting people into liberation, like sometimes you just do certain things that are like, yeah, I just have to do this, right? I just have to do this. And of course, you can study the life of the Buddha, past lives of the Buddha, to get a sense of that as well. Okay, so that's it for me. So I'll see you all Monday. Monday we have Medicine Buddha. Also next Thursday we have Free Radicals as well. Okay. That's it for me. Thank you all again. I know we went over a little bit, but yeah, there we go.